Well, all of this month we've been talking about the infinite flow of abundance and of good, including money, and that it's available to us. And we realize that we're in the midst of that infinite flow, that we can learn to direct that flow. And if it's not flowing, well, we've got to look and see whether do we have our foot on the hose? We just take it off. Or maybe there's something in the hose that's blocking it, and it's probably our own belief that's limiting the flow. So also today we're going to talk about how it's up to us to learn how to receive from the divine giver and to assimilate and release the infinite flow, because we can only receive as much divine flow as we can embody. Right? So this week we're considering how to share it fairly, and and we can be grateful to share a slice of our pie because there is always plenty more. Spirit can always make the pie bigger. It's an infinite size pie, right? So we always have plenty to share. So let's go over the first of those three things, receiving. Now, the universe is never depleted because the source of all good is infinite. We can learn to, we can limit our experience of the infinite flow, but it's always flowing. It's full on. And if we're not receiving, it's because we've narrowed it down, and we're only going to take, it's a big gusher, and we've got this little tiny cup that we're accepting, or a bowl, or maybe a barrel, or maybe we learn to have our arms wide open, right? And so the key to learning how to receive more is expanding what we call our mental equivalent, right? So what we conceive of, it's like the little model of what we think is possible. And so whatever our model is, however much we think we deserve, that's how much we get. And as we grow what we think we deserve, we experience more. The Spirit's always saying, what's your order? It's just like a restaurant. That whatever we ordered, that's what we get, right? And so we need to expand our self-concept to have more of that divine flow. Now, and embody that divine good. We will have increased our mental equivalent. Now, another important reason that we want to open our arms and hearts wide to our good is that our receiving doesn't take away from anyone else, right? There isn't just one finite pie to be divvied up. The infinite flow can just make that pie bigger and bigger and bigger. And in fact, my success enhances your success. And your success advances his success. And so on and so on. So it's a synergy because we're each a part of God, each supporting God. We each lift each other up. Now, we've talked a lot about the flow over this month, but I want to talk about assimilation. And there's a great quote from Ernest Holmes. He says, "The law of our being is a law of perfect assimilation, elimination, and circulation. A knowledge of our oneness with the God life is all about and within us. It will heal when we recognize its presence and activity within us." Right? So that's that natural circulation. And so think about this. When we breathe, we retain some air. We retain that oxygen and use it in our body, send it through our blood. And when we eat, we retain some of the food. We convert it to energy, to new cells, muscles, bones, and we also release what we no longer need anymore, right? That waste product. Phil Lott, in his book, Money is My Friend, he has a great quote. He says, "If you have the ability to save regularly, it is an indication that you are at least as intelligent as the squirrel who stores away nuts for the winter." Right? So investing ourselves, that's what we do with our savings and investments. But if we don't value ourselves or don't value money even, maybe we don't even think we have enough money coming in the first place, we're going to get rid of it as soon as it comes in, perhaps, right? We have this idea of lack. There's not much coming in, and it's already gone, spoken for before it goes out. Someone called this money diarrhea. Not too pleasant, but there's a lot of Americans that are living paycheck to paycheck. And there was a a person who was living paycheck to paycheck, and they came into Science of Mind. They started taking the classes. Thought, this is great. I'm going to do a prayer spiritual mind treatment for more money. And she got a new job and with a substantial pay increase. This is really exciting. This stuff works. And soon, though, she discovered that she was living again from paycheck to paycheck, just with bigger numbers. And she became aware that money was not the solution. It was a change in consciousness that really needed to happen, right? Now, according to a June 2021 survey by PYMNTS, or Payments, and the Lending Club of about 28,000 Americans, 54% of Americans say they live paycheck to paycheck, right? And almost 40% of high earners, this is people that earn $100,000 or more a year, say they live that way. 40%, right? Now, there's an acronym called HENRYS, H-E-N-R-Y-S, and it's an acronym for High Earning, Not Rich Yet. And these are people that struggle to balance their spending and savings habits, right? They may be juggling school loans, mortgages, auto and credit card debt. Maybe they have a child or two. But they also might be experiencing that lifestyle creep. When one standard of living rises as fast or even faster than their income, right? Living paycheck to paycheck essentially makes them especially vulnerable to inflation, right? And a lot of people are complaining about that because they were on the edge already, and then the inflation took them there. So there's some kind of shift that we need to look at. Some financial advisors recommend that people follow a 50-30-20 rule. And this was, there's a slide for that. And this was made popular by Elizabeth Warren, right? And a lot of other financial advisors as well. But she recommends that 50% of your after-tax income is used for your needs. This is essential things like housing, food, transportation, utilities, those things that you really absolutely need, right? Then the 30% is for your wants, discretionary items. These are not the same as your needs, right? People have to learn that sometimes. And so these are things like for entertainment, like your Netflix subscription, right? Your vacations, eating out, or maybe a fancier car or a bigger house, or whatever those things are that you don't need just to live, right? Those are choices we make. And then 20% is for your long-term savings and investments. So this could be your emergency cash reserve, your retirement, debt retirement, college savings, all of those things that you're planning for the future and giving yourself, you're investing in yourself, right? From that divine flow. That's your assimilation part. That's the part that you're retaining. Now, the third part of the law of circulation is release. I'd like to talk about the shadow side of release first, which is when we hold on to something and don't release. This leads to stagnation. Perfect example, the Dead Sea. It's a salt lake that's between Israel and Jordan, right? It's the lowest water surface on the earth. It's 47 miles long, and it has a maximum width of 10 miles. It is 1,000 feet deep. It's fed mainly by the Jordan River, but it has no outlet. The water accumulates there and gradually evaporates, leaving behind the salts and whatever else, sediments and so forth, that were in the water. It is 6 times as salty as the ocean. It's so salty that the lake contains no life. And even when you take saltwater ocean fish and drop them in there, they soon die. There's not enough oxygen. They can't breathe. There's too much salt. So we have to keep releasing that infinite flow to keep a healthy circulation going. We need to receive, assimilate, and release. Okay? Now, remember, when you're releasing, that there's always more flow coming. Right? So we don't need to hang on because, I'm going to need this someday. Well, we've got an opportunity to share with some people through the Winter Warmth and Wellness. And so people have brought in, extra socks and coats and toiletries and all kinds of things that people might need. But we know that there's always more coming. So now there are 2 forms of financial release I'd like to talk about today. Now, the first one is spending. Okay, so we want to use money and recognizing that it's a money exchange to release that infinite flow to, and we choose the services and the things that we want to purchase. And we want to spend wisely using that 50-30-20 rule, how we spend our money. And while we're doing it, though, it's important to be grateful for what we choose to receive in exchange. It might be a great meal or food or clothes, clean water, heat, electricity, and there's even this thing called taxes we spend our money on. But what they really mean, those taxes, that is what we pay for the police and for parks and for road maintenance and for schools and all of these things that we really want to have high quality schools, for instance, right? That's what those taxes are for. And so we can bless that and be grateful for it as well. Now, the second form of giving, which is also donating or tithing, it's described in the tithing is described in the Old Testament in the book of Leviticus. And it's a form of taxation that was required of Hebrews to fund their theocracy. Remember, the religion and the government were one. And so they had to contribute a mandatory 10% of their produce in their herds of animals. Now, this is nothing new. Tithing had been practiced almost universally throughout the ancient world. But consider that the book of Leviticus has a lot of other mandatory laws about diet and prohibiting work on the Sabbath. And, an infraction, there, even in the Bible, it talks about someone being stoned to death for gathering harvest on the Sabbath. That's pretty dire results, right? So in this day and age, in the 21st century, we are not so, we don't follow those strict arbitrary laws in that same way. So many religions still require or recommend, at least, that their followers contribute that first 10% of their income to their church or their synagogue, right? Some people really have difficulty with this, feeling that it's an obligation to donate a fixed 10% to their church. Is this still a good practice? Now, the basic idea of tithing back 10% of one's income to the divine flow, to the source, to recognize that source in gratitude, is a basically good idea. And I'm not saying we should get rid of that. It's just as a farmer keeps the best 10% of their seed, of their produce, to plant for next year's crop. You have to reinvest for the future, right? And so when you're looking and you're doing your budgeting, you might want to plan that 10%, probably out of your discretionary 30% funds. But it's something. But it's not a rigid contract with God. It's not a rigid contract about where it needs to go. It is not a contract where we give back to God in order to get back the next year. It is about the givingness. We can't outgive God, right? God is infinite flow. We have the infinite flow available to us. And so we're just giving a portion of it to things that we think are wonderful, right? Wherever we find them. Now, Jesus, in his teachings in the New Testament, he said that I have come not to throw out the law, but to fulfill the law. And so he, one of the things that he critiqued was the Pharisees, and they were making in this chapter they were talking about in Luke 11:42, and the Pharisees said, they were talking about how great they were because they gave all these donations and they were exactly measuring how much they gave, down to the fine tooth comb. And this is what Jesus said in Luke. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you give God 1/10 of your mint, rue, and all other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone. All right? So think about this. So he's saying that if you don't support equal justice and the love of God, if you're not giving to all people, then this is, you're forgetting the whole purpose about giving, right? it's more important than calculating an exact tenth for our tithe. Jesus was saying that we should give with love and seek to treat all people justly with equitable distribution of resources. We should take care of our family. All right, we should feed our children before we give 10% to the center. Right. So we have to really think about it's the giving spirit and knowing that there's infinite flow coming in behind us. You know, our fellow beings are just like us, a part of that one life that is God. All right. And so it's important to give to the people and the institutions that inspire us and support our spiritual growth. Very important. But it is also essential that we financially support our families, pay our bills, and lovingly sponsor people and institutions that lift up humanity to a higher level of existence. Right? Basically, we want to give our whole tithe. All right? The 10%, the whole tithe is our whole self. So when we look at that 10% tithe, it's like training wheels. You know, say this is like the target that you want to hit. And so, you know, like when you're practicing in archery, you know, you've got the bullseye in. So you learn your technique of practicing with the bow and arrow, and you can hit that bullseye after lots and lots of practice. And then when you go out someplace else, you're able to hit the target that you want. And so it's the same thing by having those training wheels. We learn to ride the bicycle with the training wheels, and then eventually, hopefully, you don't want to be 12 years old with your training wheels on the bike. You take the training wheels off and you're able to ride the bike and go whipping around with your friends and go wherever you want. Right? So if we're following that 50, 30, 20 rule, then that 10% goal will probably come out of our 30%, right? It's a choice of how we're spending our income. It's a value. And we're choosing to support our spiritual community. We're choosing to feed people that have little or no food today rather than going out and having a meal in a fancy restaurant, right? We can feed one person or we can feed a lot of people, right? So it's a choice. What are our values? On the other hand, we do occasionally want to go out and have that really nice meal to celebrate or what have you. You know, there are also people that have so much wealth beyond their essential needs that they can choose to give generously to create a world that works for everyone. You know, the J.K. Rowling, you know, her net worth was over $1 billion at one point, and it went down below $1 billion. Why? Because she decided to give $160 million away to charities, to causes that she thought were important. She wanted to give. That would be a great, that's a great goal to be able to give away $160 million, Just think of all the good that we can do. But this is about that givingness. This is a part of what supports life. And this is the whole tithe. And it's giving of our whole selves and not just the money, right? We talk about tithing our time, talent, and treasure. Kahlil Gibran in his classic The Prophet said, "You give but little when you give of your possessions. It is when you give of yourself that you truly give. Give as in yonder valley the myrtle breathes its fragrance into space." It's like that lily that was unfolding from the reading this morning. It gives because it's been given so much by Spirit. So what we'd like to talk about and what Eric Butterworth talks about is the concept of conscious giving. Right? So we're consciously aware of the flow. We're consciously giving. We're consciously giving of ourselves. And in our modern society, we allow individuals more freedom to choose how to live their lives without the Old Testament's rigid rules and consequences. But nevertheless, there are still many benefits of giving. Most notably, you don't receive if you don't give, right? So these benefits. So it's like when you don't do meditation or you don't do yoga or you don't go to the gym, you don't eat healthy food, you don't get the benefits of doing those activities. And so when you give, you get all of the benefits back of that giving. It's also when we have to give so the infinite flow doesn't stagnate, all right? We don't want it to have no outlet. We find a wonderful, perfect outlet. And finally, giving is an opportunity to continue the flow of money to benefit the world. Right? As we give, we learn to trust in our divine source. Brene Brown, in her book, The Gift of Imperfection, she says, the real mystery is faith, not fear, not ghosts and goblins. It's where we find the courage to believe in what we cannot see and the strength to let go of our fear of uncertainty. You know, my water's here. Yeah. And so when we have this trust in the infinite flow always being available to us, it changes our lives. And you know, when my first spouse and I, we were living in Carson City, and we had bought this perfect, beautiful home. It's about a block from Brenda's house is right now. But about less than a year after we bought that house and moved in, I was laid off. And my husband was, self-employed. He had good clients, but he had his big client at that time was 2 months late paying their invoice. And so our cash was winding down. I wasn't working at the time. I was trying to do something new. And so, we were really having to pinch our pennies. And so I was in practitioner class at the time. And so, I said, okay, I wrote a spiritual mind treatment because we needed to have abundance to eat and to furnish our home, right? And so on the top of the list was a sofa. Now, our living room was this beautiful room that had a view right down Washoe Valley that we could look out at the lake. You could just sit on the floor in the nice carpet and enjoy it, but it would be nice to have something to sit on other than our kitchen chairs. So I had always tithed since I was a child, but regular giving was somehow new and uncomfortable to my husband, Pat. So especially when our cash flow was so strapped, right? Nothing else was working. So he agreed, let's pray for our family's abundance. So we read that treatment together. Well, less than a week later, one of his clients paid an invoice. This is great. All right, perhaps there is something having to do with that spiritual mind treatment, Pat thought. So he wasn't comfortable tithing a full 10%. So he said, let's just try it. We'll just do a 1% tithe. So he found a charity that he wanted to donate to and gave some to the center at the time. And we caught up on the bills and we set aside $100 to save towards the sofa. Right? Now, it would take a while to save up for a sofa, at $100, unless we wanted some more student furniture. We already had enough of that student furniture, what we did have. But the next Saturday, Pat was driving down 395 on the way to Reno, and he got to Mountain Rose Highway, and off to the left, there was a man standing there with this whole bunch of furniture. And it was, what's this? So he went on over, and it turns out that there was this little ski lodge up near Ski Tavern or Mount Rose, somewhere in that area, and they were redecorating. So they had these gorgeous sofas out there and plus some other stuff. They were just sitting there on the side of the road waiting for someone to come purchase them, a big garage sale. So he was the first one to get there that day, and so sure enough, they were love seat size, pretty heavy. They were ski lodge looking furniture, but there were two that looked like they were brand new, and there was one that just had a little tiny tear. So this looks good, and so what was the price? $35 sold. 3 times 35 was $105. So we came up with the other $5, and we had 3 sofas. So we piled up the 2 that would fit into his old Land Rover and came home. And he drives into the driveway at our house, and he comes in, and he's got this big smile. And he said, "Oh, you've got to come out and see this." Okay, I stopped whatever I was doing and go outside, and he proudly showed me these sofas, right? Just perfect for our home. And he went back and got the other ones. But when we brought the sofas, we brought them in, so excited, put them down in the living room, and sat down, and we looked out at our view in our sofas, right? When Divine Source had taken care of us, he had given. He had trusted Spirit, and when he trusted, the invoices got paid. And so it felt good to be in the divine flow. It felt good for Pat to be supporting his family. And I still feel prosperous and supported by Spirit when I see those sofas. So as we learn to trust that we are in the midst of the infinite divine flow, our lives transform. As we learn to receive that infinite good with our arms and hearts wide open, we learn to retain and assimilate some of the good to support our physical and financial well-being, and then release the infinite flow to its next stopover by wise spending or by giving of our whole self. When we practice generous, conscious giving, we support our own lives and the health of our spiritual communities and other institutions that lift up all of humanity to a higher level of existence. It's the consciousness of giving from infinite flow to God. Let's take this to prayer. And so as in this moment, we are still, we sense that infinite flow all around us. We feel that we are loved deeply just as we are. And as we nestle down into that flow, feeling so supported, we let our thoughts dwell not on the breath or the lack of breath as we breathe in and out, but on that which breathes. It is that infinite life of Spirit that is breathing us. Sense the freedom of this God life flowing in and out of you. Feel that joy of living when we know that we are one with God. That flow is unimpaired. Our lives are filled, full to overflowing. We have plenty to share, and we do with gratitude and with love. We spend wisely, knowing that there is enough. And we don't need to have more than, we don't need to overspend or even underspend. But it is in accordance with that divine flow. And so we're able to right size and balance our lives and live with plenty. And we lovingly and gratefully give back to our spiritual center and to those people and organizations that lift us up spiritually and lift up the whole world. And together, as we reach out arm in arm, hand in hand, together, we lift up the whole world. And everywhere throughout this world, as that consciousness of giving from the divine infinite flow ripples out everywhere, each person one by one is lifted up and stands tall and strong and is there to support the next person and the next and the next. And it is done with love and with joy and gratitude and deep abiding peace. The pie need not be divided where there's not enough. We grow the pie because it is from that infinite source. And so we share our abundance. And that supports the love and the peace and humankind living together in harmony and understanding. This is the truth of who we are as individuals, as a spiritual community, and as the humanity of humankind. We live in love and divine abundance, and it is good. And so I release these words knowing that it is already done, and even greater unto the ends of the world. And so it is, and so we let it be.